Books, books. I like books. I'm gonna read them all.
Hi readers, Chris here. Welcome to my bookish channel, and today I'm going to be doing another book tag, the Half Human Heroes tag. This was a tag that Jeremy Fee created earlier in the year when this book first came out. He was kind enough to tag me. Obviously, I haven't done it yet, but I figured since I reviewed this book this week that it was a good time to do this tag. Quick reminder before we jump in, there's still time to ask a question for my upcoming Q&A. Go check out the posts on my community tab. You have until the end of the day on Monday, September 18th to ask your question. After that, no more questions because I have to film the video. Now let's jump into today's tag. I'm going to jump right in with question number 1, which is based on the foreword of Half Human Heroes, but give a shout out to someone in the fantasy booktube community. This is really funny because a lot of the booktubers that I follow and that follow me back are a little bit more on the horror side, but I do know at least one, and that is Kirsten over at Reading Nymph. So Kirsten, from one fellow fantasy lover to another, you are my shout out. Prompt number 2 is based on the short story Dishonored in Death by Mason in the Dark, and it is, who are your favorite sibling characters in a story? Now I know the answers to these questions are supposed to be about fantasy books. However, I can't help the first thing that came to my mind here, and that is The Other Boleyn Girl by Philippa Gregory. This is probably like one of my favorite books of all time in general. It's a historical fiction and it is about Anne and Mary Boleyn. Now, Anne Boleyn is famous for being Henry VIII's second wife. She was beheaded. She's the one that got him to divorce his long-term wife, Catherine of Aragon. And this book is about Anne's sister, Mary, because Mary actually was the king's mistress first before Anne came into the picture. So it's very much a historical fiction, Tudor era England. There's backstabbing, there's betrayal, and at the heart is the story of these two sisters, both with big ambitions and big dreams, and obviously for one of them, it ends very tragically, but this was the first thing that I could think of because these two sisters have such a interesting, complex, loving relationship, but yeah, it's complex to say the least. Prompt number 3 is based on the story Goatman's Bridge by P.M. Brown, and that is, what is your favorite story with the supernatural in it? There's a ton of good choices for this one because I do love supernatural stories. Vampires, werewolves, witches, all that stuff. I decided to go with a personal favorite of mine, and that is the Soulless series by Gail Carringer. I happen to be reading a Gail Carringer book right now, and that just reminded me of how much I love Soulless. If you're not familiar with this series, this is basically a Victorian steampunk supernatural tale. Our main character is a girl named Alexa Terabati. She is the oldest of her family. She has a bunch of sisters, and because she hasn't been married off yet, she's kind of seen as like a spinster in polite society. But what people don't realize is that she is what is known as a preternatural. So a preternatural means that she doesn't have any supernatural abilities herself, but she has the ability to take away supernatural abilities from others. So for example, if you are a vampire and Alexa touches you, you'll turn human and mortal again. If you are a werewolf and she touches you, you'll become human and mortal again. So she has this very unique ability, and she gets pulled into this like crazy plot. But I love this story because it takes place in the Victorian era, so you have all those like Victorian dresses and polite society, tea and crumpets. And Gail Carringer, her books are just funny, they're silly, and they're so much fun. So if you haven't read it, you definitely should check it out. Prompt number 4 is based on the short story The Band Gets Together by Dane Cobain, and that is, what is your favorite story that incorporates music? Now, for this one, I could not think of one. So, Jeremy, I'm going to steal your answer for this one, and that's going to be The Kingkiller Chronicles by Patrick Rothfuss. And that's because the main character of the story, Kavoth, he is a minstrel. He's many things, but one of the things that he does is he plays this instrument, and it's like a really important part of his life because his family were like this traveling troupe of performers. So he's really dedicated to like playing this instrument, and I forget what the term is off the top of my head, but it's basically like a lute. It's a string instrument. It plays a very big role in his life and his story, and yeah, I couldn't think of anything else, so that's why I had to pick this book. Prompt number 5 is based on the story Home of the Gnome by Jeremy Fee, and that is, what is your favorite playful or interesting title? Again, there were a couple different options I had for this one, and I decided to pick a book that I actually don't think I've ever talked about on my channel before, and that is A Night of Cake and Puppets by Laini Taylor. You may recognize Laini Taylor. She wrote the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy, Strange the Dreamer, Muse of Nightmares, and this is a novella, so it's like a short story, and it is actually a companion novel to Daughter of Smoke and Bone. In Daughter of Smoke and Bone, our main character, Karu, has a best friend, Zuzana. And Zuzana is basically like this tiny little girl from the Czech Republic. She is super artsy. She's into making all these puppets. In the Daughter in Smoke and Bone like story, she has a crush on a boy. So this companion novel is all about Zuzana and her first date with her crush and what happens to them. It's a super cute story. It all takes place in Prague in the Czech Republic. There's great illustrations in here. This book was actually illustrated by Laini Taylor's husband. Super cute stuff. If you're not familiar with Daughter in Smoke and Bone, another one you should definitely look up because that trilogy is fantastic. Prompt number 6 is inspired by the short story Abandoned Hope by Jessica Haas, and that is, what is your favorite moral quandary in a story? For this one, I decided to go with a recent read, and that is Babel by R.F. Kuang. I would say any book by R.F. Kuang would fit this question because she writes such morally gray characters in morally gray situations. I did a really deep dive about this book. If you haven't seen it, I will link it in the description box below, and I talked about this a lot. So all I will say for the purposes of this video, to keep it short, there is a situation where a group of students are really trying to get the government to listen to them and stop this war that they're planning. And they're in a situation where the government is not listening, they're not making a difference, no one is paying attention to them. So they kind of have to decide, like, there's nothing else that we can do to get their attention other than violence. Like, and violence means that people are going to get hurt, possibly die. But if we don't do this, if we don't do violence, then we're not going to be able to stop this war. We're not going to be able to help the greater good. So very much a moral quandary in this story. And I definitely felt a certain way when I was reading it. It kind of changed my mind by the time I got to the end. And yeah, really forced me to think about some tough moral questions, but I really enjoyed that. Question number 7 is based on the short story, and I know I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Amarathian Amphitheater by Liam Q.D. Hall. And this question is, who is your favorite Immortal character? I had a hard time with this one because I really couldn't think of a truly immortal character. There's lots of creatures that live very long lives, but ultimately can be killed, so they're not truly immortal. So I haven't really read many stories with like truly immortal characters, so I'm bending the rules for this one a little bit, and I am going with my favorite vampire, Eric from the Sookie Stackhouse books, aka True Blood, if you've seen the TV show. I love Eric. Eric is one of my favorite vampires of all time. I love him. If you've read the series or if you've watched the show, you'll know why, but let's just say he's like one of those bad boys but with a heart type character because he kind of likes our main character Sookie. Yes, vampires technically not immortal, but they live a very long time. They can be immortal as long as no one stakes them through the heart or cuts off their head, I guess. Question number 8 is based on the short story Lies of the Sunstone and the Hybrid Prince by S.D. Houston. And this question is, who is your favorite thief character or story with a heist in it? This was an easy one for me because this book is definitely going to be on my top 10 this year for favorite books, and that is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. This is a YA fantasy, and it is a magical heist. That's what this whole book is. It is a heist. If you've read it, chances are you love it. And if you haven't read it, go out and read it. It is so good. It is so good. It's so much better than Shadow and Bone. It's so much better. Oh my God. Go read it now because it is really fantastic. Question number 9 is based on the short story Red Eyes by Kupal Yosef Kank. And this question is, what is your favorite story with an adventuring party or found family in it? Again, this one was pretty easy for me. The story that I read recently that had a found family is House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. Currently on loan to a friend, but that is it's the perfect found family type story. If you're not familiar with it, it's about this man who visits orphanages to decide if the orphanages should stay open or shut down based on all these rules and regulations. He's a by-the-book type person. So he gets picked for this special assignment, and he goes to visit this orphanage that is not like any other orphanage because all the kids there are magical. There's one who's like a fairy, there's one who has gnome blood, there's one who may or may not be the child of Lucifer, and let's just say that our by-the-book type character really gets put through the ringer and really has to grapple with what he thinks and believes and where he belongs. Prompt number 10 is based on the short story More or Less Human by Margaret Pinard. And that question is, what is your favorite story with a surprise twist or reveal in it? And again, I've read a lot of good books that have had twists in them over the years, but the one I read most recently, I think, that really surprised me was actually The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. This book is super long and it's super chunky. And honestly, I went in totally blind. I had no idea what this book was about. I went in blind and it is a lot. It's a lot of setup. There's a lot of things that happen. And the whole time I was reading this 1,000-page book, I'm like, where is this going? Where is this story going? I couldn't see the bigger picture. And then all of a sudden at the end of the book, you find out a piece of information that completely recontextualizes the whole story. It makes everything make sense. It's like a mind-blowing moment, and that was the last time that I got to the end of the book, and I think I actually gasped out loud and went, oh my God, wow, that's crazy. So definitely Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. And finally, prompt number 11 is based on the short story The Defense of Burgond by David Wiley, and this question is, what is your favorite battle in a story? And again, I've read a lot of good stories with a lot of good battles, but literally the first thing that jumps to my mind when I think of an epic fantasy battle is the final battle in Return of the King, the third Lord of the Rings book. Although technically, is that the last battle? The Battle of Gondor. It's been a while since I've read it. Don't come for me. The Battle of Gondor, the big battle at the end of Return of the King. That's one of my favorite battles of all time. Both for the movie and the book version, they're just so epic. There's so many things going on, and my absolute personal favorite moment in any battle scene ever is when, I forget her name, Arwen defeats the freaking Night King guy, and he's like, no man can defeat me, and she's like, I am no man, you go girl, you go girl. Hands down, my favorite moment in a battle scene, so had to go with Return of the King. All right, so those are all the prompts. Now I'm going to tag some people. It's been a while since this tag was circulating, so I don't really remember who's done it or who has not. But off the top of my head, I'm going to tag Bad as Rad, M over at Dark Violet Dreams, Edie Lewis, and Book Buds. No pressure. Hopefully you didn't already do this one, but yeah, you're tagged. That is all for me today. So now I want to know from you, what are your answers to some of these questions? Let me know in the comments section below. And as always, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not already, please subscribe to my channel for more bookish stuff coming your way soon. All right, everyone. Happy reading.